Hello, my name is Andrew Brooks. Another presentation on non-linear existentialism, my experience, truth, and conclusions derived from it. I put my, I, other words that are reference to myself in brackets and quotations because I want to emphasize in this one what I can actually try to say about myself or my experiences. And I think I just needed to emphasize that by putting them into commas, colons. Table of contents, start with skepticism, my experience, truth from that, perfect system, states of perfection, related inferences, coexistence of perfect and imperfect, conclusion and questions. We start with the idea of skepticism. When we talk about philosophy, what is truth, ontology, as well as epistemology, it always goes down to how can we know anything? And it goes down to the idea of skepticism. Due to the inherent limitations of human perception, those conclusions which may be drawn from it, it is not logical or even possible to postulate or justify truth statements based on such experience. So the question is that if we are flawed, how do we know anything? But we can know something. And the thing that I do know is that I am imperfect. This is to me, a very truth statement, is I know basing on, even if there's nothing existing beyond, or I do not understand it, I do understand that in comparison to what I think I see, I am imperfect in comparison to it. Not only imperfect in concept, but imperfect in that even if there's nothing beyond myself, I get tired, I get hungry, I make mistakes. So therefore, from that, then I know I'm perfect, because I'm not optimal in any one of my states. So given that, the perfect system is one that is composed of internal and external interfaces that are able to obtain and maintain the optimal levels of its defined states. In comparison, non-perfect systems have states that are non-optimal levels. So again, the idea is that if you've got something that's perfect, that is always going to be within its system operating at the highest amount. It doesn't mean all the states are always working as best they can, but they're optimal for the conditions that allowed it to basically exist. And that's why the idea of able to obtain. So this is kind of the evolutionary idea, is that given its environment, it has achieved its highest state within that system. States of perfection. However, the idea that not all perfect systems are equally perfect in comparison to each other. It should be noted that while perfect systems are equal in their ability to achieve optimal levels of given states, the states and the requirements to achieve those states can be dramatically different. So the idea of the perfect circle. Someone can look at the sun and say, well, it does appear to be a perfect circle. So there, in fact, it does exist. In comparison to the perfect being, has extremely high requirements. It could be argued that a perfect being cannot exist. Well, I'll talk about that later, but again, you can't say a perfect circle has the same requirements as a perfect being. Related inferences to what I've talked about before, mainly the main one that I know that I am imperfect. I believe concepts come from experience. Concepts are used to understand experience. Therefore, in this light of this, that again with it being non-linear existentialism, an energy model, that everything that I experience has to come from a source, an energy emitting source that I am aware of. And so any concepts are derived from the concept, from that experience. Not that a concept itself exists in a way that it does not, or is not capable of emitting energy. So concepts are derived from experience, but concepts don't stand by themselves without having some substance and ability to emit energy. My experiences seem to infer that the imperfect is not only aware of, but also appears to create the perfect. This goes back to the very beginning of non-linear existentialism, the self-line function. That in the beginning, that when I become to be an I, when I separate from the environment, I cause uncertainty in myself and able to decrease the amount of energy within myself because of the I. And then through learning, through maturation, that I'm able to remove those incongruencies within myself. Again, the idea of life is residual incongruencies are equal to zero, going towards zero. So the third point, my experience seems to infer that the perfect, in this case a God, the perfect being, should not be able to create or be in communication with the flawed state, being me. This is because, it's a logical statement, this is because the steady state of an omnipotent, omniscient, immortal being cannot be disturbed by any external or internal forces, by definition, to cause this to occur, i.e. nothing can make it imperfect, not even itself. And this leads to another conclusion later on. So the idea of the coexistence of the perfect and imperfect, as postulated by non-linear existentialism, there are aspects of me that are inherently incongruent with the environment. This is going to be going down to the idea of layer 6 of the cerebral cortex, producing a certain amount of instability, where the amount of energy that's associated with patterns is going to fluctuate, and through that, new energy, new patterns are going to be created, or new patterns are going to be created, and this is going to lead hopefully to the optimization. It is not a teleological idea that there is a specific state that is going towards uh, in the idea of that specific pattern related to the outside. The system itself is just trying to optimize its energy, and through associating with itself internally to the external, trying to find out which patterns might be, but the idea itself is towards the energy, not towards those specific patterns. So let's get back to this argument here, which in its natural sustainable state can be considered to be perfect. So here I'm saying is that the environment can be considered perfect if it's sustainable, going back to the idea of what perfection is. Again, there's the various systems that can be perfect. All they require is to be optimizing their states. So my realization of the I and its imperfection creates anxiety, which is experienced as a decrease of neuronal energy below the prime PNBAL. So they're going to be below the below the primary needs baseline activity level that I was using before, kind of saying that when you were born, this is the most sustainable energy that the individual has, and through interactions in environments and such, it moves away from it, and through life, self-line function goes back towards it. So the primary needs baseline activity level is going to be moved down from it. So this is the motivation of my creation of the various states of real or conceptual perfection. It stands to reason then that the more uncertain a person is, the higher the state of perfection created by that person, and more likely that because there's higher and higher requirements for that perfect state to be achieved, like the perfect being, it'll be conceptual, meaning that I have produced that that state in my mind to achieve something to decrease my own uncertainty about myself, and hopefully through that go back towards a private needs baseline activity level. So in conclusion, I believe by acknowledging my own imperfection, the philosophical school of thought known as skepticism is correct that it is very unlikely I can experience things as they are. Truth, I cannot know truth. However, given the arguments I have offered, it is not logical. Logical meaning is consistent and non-contradictory for such a school to also imply that this and that there are no truths that I can state about myself. As such, I've already stated the truth about myself. I am imperfect. I do not need to know anything external to myself to know that. The creation of my own concept of perfect being, such as God, is an example of such a truth. In addition, this is very important, I am also aware that if such a perfect being existed, I could not exist. And just think about this for a second. If you've got a perfect being that's omniscient, omnipotent, and immortal, why would it exist only in one area? So let's just say that God, the idea of a perfect created being that was able to be in all areas of all time, but the people in themselves are in these areas, that you've got such a heavy influence of this God. It has to exist in the physical plane in some way to interact with us. Its influence would actually cause us to very quickly be itself. It's the idea of thermodynamics, if I'm allowed to, because thermodynamics is an energy model such as non-linear existentialism, that if you've heated an area with a substantial heat source that's replenishing, that all the items in that area would suddenly quickly be the same level of heatness. So the idea that if this perfect being existed in the way that it's usually described, at least from the Western perspective and a few Asian perspectives, that we would soon be engulfed and overwhelmed and annihilated in some way by the perfect being. So, in a logical manner, that one excludes the other. The imperfect, if we talk about beings, and I'm a being, and the idea of a perfect being would exclude each other. And also the other idea I want to emphasize here is that uh, there are different levels of perfection. So a perfect environment that's sustainable would have to basically exclude humanity, which in itself, through its difficulties with its own uncertainty and striving to reach uncertainty, and also push through the environment to exert the I, destroys the environment. And only through the self-lying function and achieving a goal, and a goal in for some people is awareness of their own inadequacies and requirements to improve themselves, or for others they need to create a concept of the perfect being and have that perfect being help them towards their own perfection. But either way, be it awareness of myself and not looking at an external standard or a person requiring an external standard of perfection, either way, they're trying to get rid of the incongruities with themselves that have caused that deflection away from the primary needs baseline activity level. So on that, it's just nothing new from the other presentations that I've given. I just want to put it in a larger context, and also the idea of perfection, which I believe some philosophers have got kind of confused with, that the idea of that every level, everything that's perfect is considered equally the same state, but it isn't true. A perfect circle is much easier to achieve than, or actually sometimes it appears to actually exist, as opposed to a perfect being, which actually excludes those who would actually ask for or question if a perfect being can exist. So the thing is that a concept is ability to is used and it's necessary to understand our experiences, to consider them and frame them in a way that can be considered or understood. But just because we can create such a thing doesn't mean that it actually does exist physically. But it is very, very important for those that need it framed in such a way. So I thank you very much for your time and your patience in this matter. Take care, and any questions, please contact me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.